And I'm sure you guys have seen this as well, of like when you're working with somebody who's coming back from a layoff or is just getting into training, like sometimes I've had people go for 6-8 months and the scale doesn't change at all, but their like clothes are fitting better and they're looking better. And like literally the scale is the exact same or maybe even a pound higher or so. That's not nearly, that's more common than I would have thought 8 years ago when I started coaching, like how often that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when someone's starting out or coming back from that layoff. How do you manage their expectations in that situation, Steve? For a non-competitor that might not be as educated on some of the nutritional aspects, and they're looking like, okay, I want to lose body fat. They're expecting weight to come down week to week. How do you keep them engaged and kind of in the game with things not changing numerically? Because I know that there's people that they acknowledge that they look better, but they still want to see that number go down, you know?
Yeah, it can be tough. I mean, first it's just education, just all the basics of like why the scale might not be going down. It's like, hey, you're losing body fat, but you're also putting on lean tissue. So it's like on the scale, they're just offsetting. Yeah. So it's like just kind of informing them about how that process works. Sometimes I'll pull the scale away if like it's really becoming just a huge distraction. Just, hey, like stop weighing yourself. One thing I've seen that Berto has done, which is an idea I'd never thought of, is he'll do like checkpoint weeks where it's like he'll have somebody only weigh in like every 4th week. So he'll do like a week of weighing and then not wait for 3 weeks and then a week for another week. Mm-hmm. So like, that's a cool strategy that I never thought of. This way you're still collecting data, but you're not having to step on the scale all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's enough where you're still actually getting a weekly average. You're just getting a weekly average every 4th week. But I try to have people focus on the positive changes. So it's like, hey, how are your clothes fitting? Let's look your RDL is going up, your bench is going up, like your rows are going up. How are you looking in the mirror? Like trying to, those basic things, their training, what they're seeing in the mirror. But yeah, and sometimes it's still tough. Sometimes even with all of that, like you said, they're still like, but I want the number to go down. Yeah. And it's tough because it's like, it's even with all of that, sometimes it's still, it's an annoying thing because it's just trying to break that mindset of, especially if somebody's been in this mindset for a while, like trying to lose weight on and off, yo-yoing for 10, 20, 30 years or something. They're just used to staring at the scale number and that being their only feedback for whether they're making progress or not. So part of it's just a process of like breaking that mindset. But yeah, it can definitely be tough.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we see that too with bodybuilders deep in prep where they know better, but it still bothers them, you know. And I think one thing that I look at in those final weeks of a prep or like digging phases of prep where weigh-ins tend to be a little bit more volatile, you know, in terms of consistency. You know, the deficit, when the deficit closes, you know, due to different adaptive aspects, you know, NEAT levels going down, like if your basal metabolic rate goes down because you're lighter, like your expenditure will come down with significant weight loss. So we expect it to narrow a bit and taper down. But another tool I use is looking at like preceding weeks. So if let's say we have 3 weeks where we just hit a wall on the scale, but we haven't changed anything in 6 weeks. In the preceding 3 weeks, we were losing at a good clip. Like everything was going to plan and then it just stopped. Chances are the deficit didn't just abruptly close, you know, just 1 week. It's like, all right, let's downregulate our expenditure by 500 calories a day, you know? So you can kind of look at the upstream rates of loss to help kind of give some peace of mind. Like objectively, we're probably still in a deficit here. The other thing, like weekly averages are great, but another thing that I think is worth looking at is you can have a weekly average that's, you know, underwhelming, you know, a reduction in fat loss that looks small on paper, but maybe they hit like a big new low that week by like a pound or two. So that's another piece of criteria for some people that I'll give is like, okay, even if your average is below or outside the ranges that we're after, if you hit a new low or, you know, you a new high, I guess, if you're in a surplus, then let's hold steady and see. So yeah, it's looking at just what's occurring leading up to that point. Because if you've been stalled for 4 weeks in a row, let's say your rate of loss was minus 0.25 for 4 weeks, and then it slowed down to next to nothing. Yeah, that's probably stronger evidence that an adjustment needs to be made than if you were losing it a half to 0.75%, and then you just hit a wall. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that before I forgot it as well. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
No, I'd say that if I tell my athletes this all the time, that if you have consecutive weeks with adjustments, it's like, then you should worry because I'm searching for something. I'm a little lost right now. So usually, I think, geez, most adjustments it's crazy how far that if the initial plan was like pretty sharp, right? Which again, a good coach will be able to generate that. So you gain more experience with an athlete, you'll get even better at that. It's just so insane how far that can take you. Like some people, and I imagine like Steve might have a lot of experience with this. They might lose enough weight where it's like, even though by default they are more efficient now because they're smaller, it's like now they're moving more because they just lost 10 pounds. So it's like, wow, up and down the stairs.
Yeah, it's like,
playing with their kids. And for some people, like I know that's my thing. It's like, as soon as I lose like from my current body weight, let me lose 7 pounds. I think overall I am moving more just because it's the lighter person. It's you got more zip, right? Obviously, towards the tail end of fat loss diet, it's the other way, right?
Pendulum swings the other direction.
Numbers don't make sense, right? Yeah. But I think it's a great skill to have, to be able to learn. People always say that is that one saying, like, stay in the pocket. And to me, stay in the pocket means, I don't know what it means. Like the way other people say, I don't know if it's like someone's going into your pocket and like hood checking you and taking your quarters, or if it's like NFL, like you're in the pocket, all these large men, it's like, don't move, don't scramble, just focus, right? Yeah. That's what I think of. It's like, stay poised. It's like, keep looking downfield. Something's going to show up, because it's one of the best skills to have, I think, even for general fat loss, is to not have these happy feet. To, if anything, learn what a deficit feels like, right? And what a deficit feels like through like different stages, because that is what saves me half the times with my adjustments. I'm like, no, this feels like on most days, the majority of the energy I'm being used seems like it's endogenous fuel source. Like it's something that once you've really figured that out, it speaks clearly to you, right? So I think for both athletes and coaches, I think athletes, it's like, hey, your stuff's not broken if your coach isn't necessarily changing things on like every week, especially if you're progressing. That's probably a great sign that you have someone on the other end that really knows what they're doing. And for coaches, I think it's the other way around. It's like, man, sometimes like you have to learn, especially when your intuition is telling you otherwise, that this is still working, to like not do what the athlete's telling you to do because they have happy feet because they're now 6 weeks out or something like that.
Yeah, I think as an athlete, sometimes it's easy for people to assume they're paying for management, which they associate with adjustments. Yeah. When really they're paying for results. Let's get you from point A to point B. It's like the amount of steps that it takes to get there is sort of irrelevant if we get to the outcome regardless. And I know
it's even more valuable that way. I think exactly. It's because you are actually you're getting more, as a matter of fact, because you're getting to work, I guess, more efficient. So I guess to me, and I'm saying this because my first prep, dude, like I literally, never mind, Brian, I'll let you finish. But no, go for it.
I was just gonna say, like, when I started my coaching career, I felt that pressure as a coach in a way, like, okay, I need to do something here. Like they're getting good results, but they're paying me to help them, and I am helping them, but I'm not having to do anything beyond the initial adjustment. So it's almost you get pressure, especially if you're early in your coaching career. Sometimes you feel like you need to make an adjustment to prove that it's like you're proving your value when that's not the case, and I think that's common for a lot of young coaches, to make little tweaks here and there. And like you said, it's all, whether or not that's coming from a place of insecurity or, feeling like they're trying to make the person feel reliant on them, in a way. But it's like, put them in a deficit. And a lot of this conversation we're viewing through the lens of fat loss here, but it's like, put them in a deficit that's reasonable, look at trends and let time do its thing. Like it doesn't need to be micromanaged on the adjustment side. I mean, it needs to be adhered to, but it shouldn't take a lot of tinkering unless you start like way too conservative in terms of the degree of deficit.
Well, and technically every week that you're not adjusting, that they would have adjusted, like left to their own doing, like that in itself is, because they're often like crimes of passion, right? It's like they're willing to work as hard as they need to, and yeah, sometimes that can, it'll get you through the first few phases of whatever you're doing, but like past the beginner phase, trying to work your way into the intermediate phases, that would be close to the advanced phases, of like whether it's fat loss or muscle building, like sometimes that sort of mindset can work against you. But what I was saying is, like, I remember my first prep with Lane, like I'm like, all right, I can't wait for this adjustment to come through, because like I am 18 weeks out now and nothing. And I'm like, really? And then we lose more weight, and then we lose more weight. And that was a big lesson, because I remember my first prep, it was like my first like really, really big fat loss phase ever. I remember I kept making adjustments just because I'm like, I guess I'm 12 weeks out. I got to make that next adjustment to go to that next level. So there's just so much value in saving people from themselves, especially because we've all seen the things that fat loss trauma can do to people. Like it can make someone who's like just a workhorse, that really diligent, all of a sudden make it so that they're having a hard time doing the most basic of like fitness task on the nutrition side of things. So yeah. Like I don't feel that way anymore, but I definitely remember at the start, it's like I got to do some sort of like little dance for my client every week in order to for them to like notice that like this is worth it. And they're not just paying me to like sit here in the waiting room with them, basically, because that's what it felt like.